Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amy Morse, and thank you for joining my webinar. So I am going to be wearing my hat of Amy C Fitzjohn today. That's my writer name. So I write fiction as Amy C Fitzjohn, and my married name is Amy Morse, and I also run my own small business where I work with small businesses to help them be better writers. So I bring a little bit of writer's razzle to business. And my background, my day job, if you like, has been in business support, and I've been writing all my life. And I've been writing ever since I was a child, ever since I could string a sentence together. I used to write little stories and tell stories to my little brother and sister. And I used to write really terrible, angsty poetry when I was a teenager. And I first started writing my first novel when I was 15. But I had this dream that one day I would be a writer and I'd get a book published when I was a kid. But that dream was very quickly beaten out of me by the school system, which insisted that I should go get a proper job and, you know, have some sensible goals instead of things like being a writer, because that was, you know, not very realistic. So I should go and do something else. So I did, like, you know, an obedient, nice girl that I am. And so I went off and got a day job and whatnot and carried on and did what you usually do, got a mortgage and all that kind of stuff, and got married and didn't have any kids, had cats. And yeah, in 2008, my husband and I sold everything and moved to Bulgaria. Just kind of on a whim, really, just because we said we wanted to live abroad. And it was at that point in my life that I rediscovered my love of writing. And I published my first book in 2013, and I wrote 4 books when we were living in Bulgaria, and it was the 4th one of those ones that I wrote that I finally published, and that book was called The Bronze Box. So you probably noticed behind me, just over my right hand shoulder here, I've got a box behind me. So I'll show you, this is my bronze box. So isn't that a lovely thing? Actually bought that in Bulgaria. I keep my books in there. And it's appropriate, as I say, because the first book in the series of books that I've got published is called The Bronze Box. And here it is. So this is the first book in the Sheridan and Blake Adventure series. And that's a series of 3 stories told over 4 books. And it's kind of Indiana Jones meets Bourne, I suppose, if you like, sort of mystery adventure stories. So it's, my main characters are a female archaeologist called Dr. Sasha Blake, who's based in Bristol, my hometown, and a guy called Tom Sheridan, who is an art expert in his own right, but he's also former army, and he works for a covert organisation called the Agency. And the Agency specialise in repatriating stolen antiquities from the black market. So in the first book, in The Bronze Box, the concept is basically Sasha Blake gets recruited by the Agency to help find an artefact that's gone missing from a dig site that she was working at as a student. And the artefact is a bronze box. And when she's recruited, she is partnered with Tom Sheridan. He also happens to be a man from her past. So they did have a brief liaison a few years before she started to work for the Agency. So throughout all of the stories, there's this tension between the 2 characters, this kind of will they won't they, Mulder and Scully-esque kind of thing throughout all the stories. And in the first book, Tom and Sasha go off in search of the bronze box. And as they are uncovering the mystery to discover the box, they realise that there is a much bigger conspiracy at work, and they have to find the box before a really awful, evil bad guy known only as the Libyan. So that's the concept. And the artefacts really in question. There's the bronze box, which is a mysterious and powerful box. And so it's kind of, what would men do? What would you give to get your hands on that power? Who would you kill? Who would die for it? That was the kind of idea behind it, really. And in the first story, Tom and Sasha go off on this sort of international caper to follow the clues to try and discover the whereabouts of the box. And on the way, they answer lots of other questions and raise lots of other questions. And it becomes apparent that it's not just the box. You also need to find 4 rings in order to open the box. So effectively, they're kind of the key to the box. And also a manuscript, which I guess is like the instruction manual to open the box. So, so that's the first story in the series. The second story in the series is called Solomon's Secrets. Here it is. This is Solomon's Secrets. And this story is set about a year after the end of the first book. So Tom and Sasha have gone their separate ways. And during the investigation to find the box, Sasha comes across a copy of the manuscript, which is the instruction manual, I suppose, if you like, for the bronze box. And she's studying it at Bristol University. But anybody who's worked in academia or knows people who work in academia will know that they're constantly struggling for funding. And so she is offered funding by a very wealthy silk trader, a man named John Solomon. And she starts to work for him to try and find the original manuscript. But he's got some terrible secrets, and Sasha becomes a victim of his partway through the story. I'm not going to tell you what he does to her, but it's really horrible. And of course, she then wants to get revenge. So she ends up going back to the agency, where she is again working with Tom Sheridan, but this time he's her handler. And she works as a double agent to try and trap John Solomon, and also to help find the original manuscript for the agency. So that's the second book. And then the final book in the series, or final story, I should say, in this series is called Gabriel's Game, and that's split over 2 books. So here they are. So this is the final story in the series. And the first book in that series, The White Queen, during the investigation to find the bronze box, Sasha's code name becomes the White Queen, and Tom's code name becomes the Black Knight. So in the first book, in The White Queen, this is kind of mostly about Sasha, but told from Tom's point of view, and it follows on immediately after the end of Solomon's Secrets. There's a big cliffhanger at the end of Solomon's Secrets, and this picks up from the end of it. And in The White Queen, Tom and Sasha are actually on the run, and they have to find the original manuscript in order to trade it for their lives, essentially. So that's the first story. And then where that story lifts off, again with a really big, massive cliffhanger, I'm going to tell you that it is a terrorist attack. But I'm not going to tell you any more than that because I don't want to spoil it for you. You have to read it and find out. But after that is the Black Knight. And this is the final book in the series. And this book is mostly about Tom, but told from Sasha's point of view. And essentially, they kind of go through trying to discover the original manuscript, solve the mystery, all the rest of it. It gets a bit saucy as well. So that's the final book in the series. So those are the books that I have published at the moment. And I've got a lot of questions from people about how I did it, and my process, and how I managed to fit in writing and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to tackle some of those questions now. So thank you to everybody who filled in the poll. I'm going to start by just tackling probably one of the first questions, the one that got asked the most actually, was about why I chose to self-publish. But before I tackle that question, there was one question from Claire, I believe it was, who asked me that question. So thank you for that, Claire. And that was about how to submit your manuscript to a traditional publisher. Now, in my case, I have to be honest and say I've never done it. And that was a deliberate choice on my part, actually, to become self-publishing. I'll explain why in a moment. But just kind of my tip, really, I suppose, in terms of submitting a manuscript to a publisher. Essentially, there's kind of a couple of ways you can get published. If you go the traditional route, then essentially that publishing house would take the risk on publishing the book. They would cover the costs, they'll sort out the cover and get all the editorial and all the rest of it done for you, rather than you having to organise that all yourself. But the downside is that they take all of most of the commission. You kind of end up getting maybe upwards of 90% of royalties are taken by the publisher. So you can only sometimes end up getting 10, 20p per book sold, which is pretty piffling, really. Especially when you consider that actually, as a writer, you have to do most of the marketing yourself. I know. Sorry. There's a bit of a myth, really, about the publishing industry, that if you get accepted by a traditional publisher, they'll do all the marketing and all the PR for you and all the rest of it. And to be honest, I'm afraid that just isn't true. It never really has been. It's just kind of a bit of a myth, really. And many writers approach publishers with a kind of cap in hand mentality, like, oh, help me, I'm a writer. I need you to, you know, sort my career out for me. But actually, that doesn't put you in a very powerful position, I suppose, in terms of working with a publisher. So even though at the moment I've not gone down the route of traditionally publishing, it is something that I'm going to consider doing in the future. And actually, I'm thinking about doing it for my next book project. But I'm going to take a slightly different approach. And I guess in a sense, this is kind of my advice to other people, really. If you are going to approach a traditional publisher with your manuscript, then, I mean, to start with, you need to have completed the manuscript. You need to really do some research and actually target the right people. Be really targeted. There's no point, if you've written a romance, there's no point going to a publisher that specialises in crime fiction or something like that. They're just not going to be interested. So do a bit of research, find out, you know, a named person that you can start to build a relationship with, you know, maybe start following on Twitter and stuff first, retweet them a few times, comment on some things, that kind of thing, you know, so that you're just sort of starting to get to know that person and you're on their radar somewhere. So I suppose that's probably one of the first things. But then approach it with a more of a business proposition head, I would say. So be quite targeted, go to the right type of publisher, look at what they want. I know that sounds really obvious, but very often people submit to publishers without really reading the guidelines properly. And that is like straight away, if you can't even follow their simple instructions, then they're just going to reject you. So that's one thing. But I suppose for me, and the way I'm going to approach a publisher in the future is, now that I've got a platform as a writer, I suppose, if you like, I've got a website, I've got social media presence, I've got a proven track record of book sales. I want to be able to go up to a publisher and say, hey, this is what I've done so far. This is how much money I've made. Therefore, I can help you make money. And what I need your help with is to get further exposure. So say perhaps foreign rights, get me into wider marketplaces, and hopefully in the future, you know, TV, movie rights, that kind of thing. That's my ultimate dream. I would love to see the books turned into movies. That would be amazing. And they are quite sort of cinematic stories in a sense. I'm quite a visual person, so I try to write in a visual way. In a sense, when I'm writing, it's like I'm watching a movie in my head and I'm trying to convey that to the reader. So I'm potentially going to be doing that myself in the future. I haven't done so far. So really, I mean, I can't offer you any kind of, you know, solid advice on how to do it because I've not done it myself, but I can offer you some sensible tips, and that's what I'm intending to do. So that kind of answers that one, I hope, around how to submit a manuscript. But in my case, actually, what I ended up doing was I published my book myself, and I did it through Amazon, which of course is the biggest marketplace anyway. So even if you're published with a traditional publisher, one of the advantages obviously is they can get you into bookshops and things. But you know, really, most people buy books from Amazon. So whatever your feelings are about Amazon, but yeah, so I'm actually self-published through Amazon, and I would say about 90% of my book sales are on Kindle. I don't actually sell that many paperbacks. Most of the paperbacks I sell tend to be where I've ordered stock myself and then I've sold them myself in person. So there's a few reasons why I did that. I'm just going to share a couple of slides with you, just to kind of summarise why I decided to self-publish. So here's my books. I've showed you them in the box, but that's what they look like. So I'm Amy Morse, writing as Amy C Fitzjohn, and the books are available on Amazon, and those are what they look like. So go and check them out, have a read, and see what you think, and pass it on. This is why I decided to self-publish. Essentially, there was a few different reasons, really. So to start with, it was about validation and social proof, and I wanted to get some feedback. So I wanted to see if people were interested in what I had to write, if people wanted to read the stories, and I wanted to get some feedback from people. I wanted to have something to build a business around as well. So my goal, I suppose, if you like, from being self-employed as I am now, being fully full-time self-employed as I was last year, I became fully full-time self-employed, is ultimately what I would love to be able to do is to be able to live and work anywhere. If I can create a living for myself doing what I love, and all I need is just, a laptop and an internet connection, then I would be laughing. That would be brilliant. I would love to be able to do that. And writing obviously is a fantastic way of doing that, because I essentially am selling digital products. So having a portfolio of books allows me to have some passive income. So that was part of it, and then that is something that I can build into my business. I've already mentioned one of the disadvantages of going the traditional route with a publisher is that they keep most of the royalty. So actually they probably profit a lot more out of the books than you would, and essentially they're taking the risk. So that's just the way it works, I guess. But if you're doing it yourself, then you get to keep all of it, or not all of it. Obviously Amazon take their cut, or whoever you self-publish with, but you get to keep significantly more royalties per book sold than if you went through a traditional publisher. So just as an example, with my books, I've already said 90% of my sales are Kindle books, and my Kindle books retail at most of them are £3.99, but the bronze box is a bit cheaper because it's the first in the series, so I want to encourage people to buy it and then buy the rest of them. And for that I get approximately £2 per book, whereas if I'd done it through a traditional publisher, then I'd probably be lucky to get half that. So it's still, it's not big bucks, but the more you sell, the better chance you have, really. And of course, you're doing all the work anyway, so you want the reward ultimately, don't you? I wanted to keep control over the pricing as well, because it's my business, I suppose, if you like. I'm building my portfolio around my books. I want to have control over my own marketing as well. If I'm going to be running my own marketing, I want to be able to do a cheap offer at Christmas if I want to, or whatever. I want to have the freedom to do that. One of the other disadvantages, I suppose, actually with traditional publishers is that a lot of them are still not quite getting to grips with the whole kind of Kindle digital reading marketplace, and actually they're kind of quite often overpriced as well, because they're obviously trying to make money. So sometimes, actually, even though I wouldn't recommend that you're too cheap or anything, but it's great to have the flexibility to be able to compete on price over much bigger players in the market, I suppose, if you like. Fast turnaround is another one as well. I mean, the other thing with self-publishing, the reason I went that route is that sometimes when you go to a traditional publisher, it can take up to 2 years from that book being accepted by the publisher to actually being on the shelves, and that's a long time to be waiting for your book to be out there and ready. If you want to build a business around it, you need it there straight away so that you've got something to build on. So that was another thing. Personal challenge, that was another one for me. I wanted to see if I could do it. I know it sounds a bit weird, but actually that was really motivating for me. It's like, let's have a go at this and see what happens and see how it goes. And I set myself a target with the first book. I told myself I wanted to sell 1,000 books in 3 years, and I sold double that in half that time. 3 years on now, with the 4 books published, I've sold just under 5,000 copies across all my titles. So that's not too bad. That's not too shabby. It's not, I'm not a bestseller. I'm not the next J.K. Rowling just yet. But yeah, I'm quite happy with that, and if I can build on that with more books, then fantastic. It's a significant chunk of my income. What's the other one I said? Oh yes, and then actually, again, this sounds a bit strange. It's like, do I actually want to be a writer? It's one thing to have this dream of doing what you love, of being a writer for a living. It's one thing to have a hobby, quite another to actually turn that into reality and try and make money off it. So those are my reasons for self-publishing. And now that I've got a proven brand, I suppose, if you like, and a proven track record of sales, that puts me in a much more powerful position to be negotiating for traditional publishing contracts or whatever else I want to work towards in the future, and I get to maintain control over it all. So that's what I do. Again, what I would say to people, I wouldn't say to you, don't go the traditional route and always self-publish or whatever. It's very much a personal choice. It depends on what your goals are and what you want to do with your books and how you want to make it work. It's going to be your decision ultimately. I wouldn't say to you, don't traditionally publish, and I wouldn't say to you, definitely self-publish. Do your homework and seek advice, get some help from people. I'm here if you want to ask me anything, connect with me, stay in touch with me after the webinar. I'm really happy to answer any questions you might have. And I might be able to steer you, hopefully, and help you make those decisions for yourself. So that's why I self-published. So the next question that I'm going to tackle was quite a lot of people wanted to know how I managed to write so many books in such a short period of time. And essentially there were 4 things really that have allowed me to do that. So first of all, it was just protect my writing time. So always, mark some time in your diary and protect it. Don't fill it with other stuff. And that takes discipline. And if you can build writing into your routine, then it's much easier to finish that project. And then the final thing really is just write, just do it. Even if you don't feel like it, just write. So ultimately, if you're going to be serious about taking writing into the future and it becoming your career, that's your job. You kind of have to do it, even if you really don't feel like it. There's always days we have when we really don't feel like going into work. And you just have to bloody do it. So just get on with it. And I know sometimes it's easier said than done, because you sit there and the screen's there and it's blank and it's blinking at you and it's saying, write something, and you're like, oh god, I don't know what to write, and then you write a load of stuff and it's all crap and you delete it all. So I get it totally. We all go through those struggles. But what I sort of say is for me, when I'm in those sorts of frames of mind, I end up doing a lot of free writing. So I just write what comes into my brain, and actually that really helps because it clears the cobwebs and opens up those arteries, I suppose, if you like, from your ideas, and actually gets them out onto the page. So yeah, I think in a funny sort of way, now that I'm fully full-time self-employed, I actually find it more difficult to maintain a sensible writing routine, because I don't have much of a routine. When I wrote the Sheridan Blake Adventure series, all those books, including the Bronze Box, even though I drafted it in Bulgaria, I finished it and I published it when I was back in the UK, and I was working full time when I wrote all of those books. And the reason I managed to fit it in, again, it was to do with routine, and it was just the way it worked for me at the time was it was literally a 9 to 5 Monday to Friday job, and my husband also had a 9 to 5 Monday to Friday job. We don't have any kids or anything, so we just have to worry about ourselves. We don't have to worry about sorting other people out, whatever. And what I'd find was we'd both be home around about 6. We'd stop and eat dinner together, and then we'd have a couple of hours between sort of 7 and 9. It was just our time to do whatever projects we want to do. So my husband would go off and play computer games or whatever, and that would be the time that I would use to write. And then at 9 o'clock we'd stop and we'd do something together. So that became our routine for quite some time before I became self-employed, and that essentially is how I managed to do it. So just routine, discipline, and just bloody write. that's how I did it. With the current project, and I'll talk about that in a minute, because that was one of the questions, is what I'm writing at the moment. As I say, I've kind of had a bit of a break in a sense with writing recently, because I've published so many books in such quick succession. My creativity kind of goes in peaks and troughs, and so I took a little break from writing creatively for the last few months, really, because I was working on the business stuff, and it's only recently that I've started to pick that up again. In fact, I published a blog post about that, so do go and check that out on my website, amycfitzjohn.co.uk. I've got a blog on there of all my different writing adventures. So so that's how I managed to do that. And I'm doing this November 2016, I'm doing NaNoWriMo, so National Novel Writing Month, which is kind of a month where you write 50,000 words in a month. In the month of November, it's kind of like an international thing. So I'm doing that this year for the next book that I'm writing, Finding the Screen, which I'll take back in a minute. Okay, so what's next? I'll come back to that one, actually. Let's clear that for now. I'll come back to the top tips in a minute. I don't want to, spoil it. That's a nice one to have at the end. So, so coming back to a couple of those things, my process, that was another question. So thank you to Samantha and Maggie, and I think there's a couple of other people who also asked about that one in particular. So it's quite a personal thing, I think, when you're a writer. I think we all have a very different way of working. I know some writers who are really structured, they kind of have to plan the whole novel, and they have all these complicated spreadsheets and whatnot. I'm not quite as disciplined as that, to be honest. My kind of process, I suppose, if you like, is once I've got the concept, I usually write the beginning and I write the ending, and there's usually a few kind of key scenes that I need to write, sort of big set pieces, I suppose, if you like, that need to happen for the story to to move forward. And those are usually the ones that are the most vivid, the scenes that are the most vivid in my imagination, the ones that I want to get out first as well. And I usually know my characters really well as well. So essentially what I do, I write the beginning, I write the ending, and then I write those scenes that are the most vivid in my mind. And those are the bits that I write first. So I don't really write in a linear way. And then I allow my my characters, if you like, to navigate their way from the beginning to the end, taking in all these different points and finding their own way to the end of the story. So what I end up doing is, as I write a chapter, I'll just jot a note on a post-it note, and I have a big bit of paper on the door in my office, and I just sort of stick them approximately the where they should be on the journey of the story, I suppose, if you like. And then I'll go through and I'll connect them as I'm writing other scenes. And once you see them all when I see them all sort of laid out, very often it's kind of like, well, how does that connect to that? And then it's like, well, if that character did that at that point, then they would be here, and then they can connect that to that, and then that becomes the next thread. So that's sort of how I end up writing it. So it's kind of written in a bit of a puzzle. But then the Sheridan and Blake books themselves, the stories themselves are kind of puzzle. So that works really well for that kind of genre, I think. In the genre that I write in, it's kind of mystery adventure genre. I suppose the nearest equivalent writers that I kind of, I'm inspired by and that write similar sort of stuff. I suppose probably the most well-known writer in that sort of genre, where they're writing about sort of a historic mystery that's being solved in the present, is probably Dan Brown. So fantastic storyteller, not such a great writer in my opinion. So yeah, it's that kind of thing is what I write. My favourite writer is a guy called Paul Sussman. Again, similar, the same sort of genre. And he was an Egyptologist. And a lot of his stories are sort of written on that. It's like a historic mystery that's based often in Egypt, and also quite a lot of his stuff is based in the Middle East as well. And then it's like a mystery that's being solved in the present by particular characters as well. So there's a couple of characters that sneak up in different books as well. So yeah, but he's only ever written, I think it's about 4 books, Paul Sussman, because he died a few years ago, unfortunately. He wasn't very old either. I think he had a brain hemorrhage or something like that. So really tragic. And such a shame, because he was such a talented writer, and I loved his books. His last book, The Labyrinth of Osiris, quite a meaty volume, but well worth the read. So he was probably my inspiration, I suppose, if you like, for the Bronze Box. And then the Sheridan and Blake series that kind of came off the back of that, really. So yeah, and I suppose also in my genre, Kate Moss is probably the writer I aspire to be most like. I suppose she's one of the few female writers in that genre. There's not very many female writers in that genre, so kind of I hope my books are compared to hers one day. We'll see. That'd be nice, wouldn't it? So yeah, so that's my process. Apparently J.K. Rowling writes in a similar way. I don't know how true that is. Somebody told me that. And also apparently the Bond movies are kind of done like that. They have the big dramatic kind of explosions bits, and then they write the story afterwards. Sometimes you can tell, frankly, but yeah. So that's kind of interesting. And then there's other writers who have a very different way of doing it. Apparently Lee Child doesn't know how his books end. He just writes them. So yeah, that's an interesting way of doing things. And actually, in a funny sort of way, the next book that I'm working on, I'll tell you about that next actually. I don't know how it's going to end yet. So that's going to be a bit of an experience for me, and slightly out of my comfort zone in terms of how I approach writing that book. So the next book that I'm writing, the project that I'm working on at the moment, and that was a question that came up as well on the questionnaire. So thank you for that, and for the people who asked for that. It's called Finding the Scream. And essentially, what that book is about, it's the first in another series, so it's a completely different series. I've finished the Sheridan and Blake series for now. Their circle's complete, if you like. I'm done with them for the time being-ish. But actually, some of the characters from the Sheridan and Blake stories will make some cameos in my future books, I think, and certainly in this one. So this one, Finding the Scream, essentially the main character in this particular story is a lady called Katerina Orlov, and she is a multilingual seeker. So she is paid by people to find things, to find people, to find stuff, to find artifacts, and that's her job essentially. And she's a character that I actually introduced in Gabriel's Game, in the fourth book, in the final book rather, in the Sheridan and Blake adventure series. And as I was writing her, I was like, oh, she's really awesome. I really like this character. I need to do something more with her. So I started to get ideas for how I was going to use her in the next books, as I was writing Gabriel's Game. So anybody who is a prolific writer will probably recognise that when you're writing one book, you've got three others still, floating around in your brain, lots of future ideas. So that will be the first in the series of books where we're essentially just about her and her journey. And the concept of finding the scream is, I don't know if you're familiar with the piece of artwork by a Norwegian artist, Edward Munch, called The Scream. It's that really famous picture. You've probably seen it around with the kind of colourful sky in the background and a kind of deathly looking figure in the front going, oh, that's that picture. So the concept of this story is, back in the 1930s, there were lots of artists and creatives who were kind of vilified by the Nazis, I suppose, if you like. Edward Munch was a visual artist who was labelled by the Nazis as a degenerate. Essentially, Hitler was a failed artist himself, and he had these dreams of building this kind of, this fantasy empire, this fantasy empire, and he hated any art that didn't fit with his aesthetic or was deemed as un-Germanic kind of thing. And so the Nazis embarked on a quest to basically loot most of Europe of all its valuable artwork, and everything that he deemed worthy, he wanted to collect and house in like the most ultimate art museum that the world had ever seen. He was going to have it in Linz, in his hometown. So that was his kind of part of his master plan, if you like. And any artwork that didn't fit into that was labelled as degenerate. But it wasn't just visual arts, it was also writers, musicians, many of whom were Jewish, that the Nazis labelled degenerate. And Edward Munch was one of these artists. And most of his work was confiscated during the 1930s and 40s and sold on. The Nazis, during this period of looting up from across Europe, were selling art that they didn't deem worthy, so that they could fill their war chest, basically, so they could fill the coffers, and then they obviously kept anything that they thought they wanted to put into their own kind of collection, I guess, if you like. And so Edward Munch was one of those degenerates, and of the artwork of his that went missing, that was confiscated, that got sold, he managed to save the 4 versions of that painting, The Scream. But there was another version of that painting. It was a lithograph, and that lithograph went missing in the 1930s. And to this day, it's never been found. So the concept of finding the scream, essentially, Katerina Orlov gets a phone call from a journalist in Berlin who has had a tip-off about a cache of stolen Nazi loot that's been found in an abandoned mine in Austria, and he needs Kat's help to go and retrieve the stuff and identify it and get it to its rightful owner and whatnot. And so the concept is that she's going over there, and one of the items in this mine is potentially, it could be maybe the scream, the missing lithograph. But there's a double meaning to the story as well, because Katerina's got some trauma from her past that she's never been able to release. So she's never been able to scream herself. So during the quest to kind of get to this artwork and solve the mystery of the missing scream, I suppose, if you like, she has to face her own demons in order to succeed. So that's essentially the concept in the next book, which I'm working on at the moment. So look out for that. Okay, let's see, what else have I got to answer from a list of questions? What we're working on now, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, let's go on to the tips, actually. I think I did flash up the slide a minute ago, but let's show you that. Okay, top tips. So my top tips for the budding writers. So there's a few here that I would say. So take imperfect action. Now that might sound a bit strange, but one of the biggest things that often creatives in particular struggle with is that concept of perfection. We don't want to put ourselves out there because we want it to be perfect and all the rest of it. And hey, heads up people, there is no such thing as perfect. It does not exist. do not set perfection as your target, because you just set yourself up to fail. It's much better to put stuff out there and get feedback. The only way anything can ever even approach perfect is if you get feedback from people. But it's never going to be perfect, because there's no such thing. So don't aspire to that. Don't let it hold you back. I know that's sometimes easier said than done, but put stuff out there you're comfortable sharing. Get feedback. That is the only way that you can possibly improve your writing. That's the only way you can improve your craft in anything, really. You need feedback. Embrace criticism. So that kind of comes into that as well, really. So one of the things I found really valuable when I was writing The Bronze Box was I just moved back to Bristol. We came back to the UK in 2010. We ran out of money, basically, when we were in Bulgaria. We came back to the UK, came back and got jobs, and we moved to Bristol, which is a fantastic city, and I absolutely love it here. So I recommend it to anybody. Anyway, so when I came into Bristol, there's quite a big writing community here. It's a really creative part of the world, actually. In fact, the creative economy is the biggest part. Creativity and aerospace are the biggest bits of economy in this part of the country. We're a real hotspot for it. There's so much creative, cool stuff going on here. Animation is just the first thing that pops into my head. Wallace and Gromit, that's all Bristol. Yay, Bristol. Anyway, so there's loads of writers here. It's quite a big creative community. So I soon got to know lots of other writers, and I joined a critique group. When essentially it was just sort of half a dozen of us, and we would meet once a month in a pub. And we would critique each other's stuff. So what we would do is, a few days before the meeting, we'd each send a chapter of a book we were working on or a short story out to the team, and then we'd give each other feedback over a pint. And I always used to say to people, tell me what's wrong with it. Yes, you want to know whether people like it. It's nice to have that little ego massage, absolutely. But I used to say to people, tell me what's wrong with it. Tell me what needs to be corrected. Tell me how I can make this better, because that is the only way you're going to improve. So even though it's really hard, especially when it's quite personal, kind of exposing your creativity through writing, through any medium really of creativity, you need that criticism in order to improve, and don't be scared. It's fine. More often than not, people want to help you. People are supportive. Other writers are supportive of other writers. So just be brave. You'll be fine. It'll be all right. I promise. Anyway, so yes, embrace criticism. I think that's really important. Support other writers. So again, I've kind of mentioned that as well. It kind of leads quite nicely into that, really. I think that's another thing as well, and partly why I like to do things like these webinars is if I can offer other people tips and inspiration to help them follow their dream, then fantastic. I needed that myself, and I want to do that for other people. And I enjoy doing it. And I want to share that, and I want to meet other writers, and I want to collaborate, and that's why I'm also a member of the organising committee for Bristol Festival of Literature, which is an annual kind of grassroots literary event that I haven't done so much this year, but last year certainly I was very involved in, and I will be involved in it next year. So yeah, supporting each other I think is really important. This is one of my favourites. I love blogging. Blogging is brilliant. I'd say blogging is probably the best marketing tool that you can use as a writer, because it's writing, and that's just awesome. It's an excuse to write. You can do that horrible thing like marketing without really realising that you're doing marketing, and that's brilliant. It gives you a great excuse to write. One of the great things that I love about blogging is that my writing has massively improved since I've been a blogger, and I actually do support people with their blogs. So one of the things that I do as part of my day job, part of my support working with businesses to help them be better writers, is to encourage people to be better at blogging and help them with blogging and train in blogging. So I run training workshops on blogging, and actually I'll show you on the full screen in a minute. I have recently published a little book called Blogging for Business as well. So any questions about blogging, fire them my way. Absolutely, stay in touch with me, and I love it. I'm very enthusiastic about it. So blogging is a big thing, I would say. As a writer, it's just a natural fit. It's so much synergy there. So yeah, so that's another big tip. And it's also a great way of just starting to build your confidence and get some feedback. So if you're writing a novel and you're not sure if it's good enough, or you don't want to put it out there, but you still want some feedback on your writing, you can put little extracts in your blog, get people's feedback, you share it with people. You can write other stuff on your blog, you can write other information on there, you can host guests, so you're starting to build up a bit of a fan base for your work, that kind of thing. So actually it's quite a useful way of building a community and also of improving your own writing and getting feedback without you like going the whole hog and publishing your book when you don't feel ready. If that makes sense. So yeah, I think for a writer, that's another great reason to blog. Be enterprising is the next one. And that sounds slightly kind of obscure, but I think one of the biggest things when you do embark on a project like publishing a novel, and there's lots of reasons people might publish a book. Maybe it's because you've got this book in you and you just want to get it out and you're not really bothered about making money out of it, or you're just doing it for posterity, or maybe it's an autobiography that you're doing for your kids, or whatever. But if you want to try and recoup some money for it, if you want to earn some money for it, and if you've spent 3 years of your life writing this book for free because it's your own time, you might as well try and earn some money out of it. Why not? What's the harm? Don't ever apologize for earning money from doing what you love. Creatives, writers, we deserve a paycheck as much as the next guy. And if you seriously want to build a career as a writer, then you do need to be a bit more business savvy. I'm sorry to say that. That sounds terrifying, but it doesn't have to be. You don't have to be some kind of suited and booted, spreadsheet themed, kind of salesy, a brilliant kind of person. It doesn't have to be like that. At all. There's so much cool stuff out there. Lots of people doing really interesting things. I'm forever hosting various webinars and things, so stay in touch with me. Look out for the stuff I do. Go on enterprise workshops, go on business courses, that kind of stuff, self-employment courses. And again, they might sound like they're really dry, but very often they're not. There's lots of different ways you can get that information. Go to networking events, mix with people, get to know people. It's amazing the cool stuff that people do and the interesting people that you meet. And these are all potential readers of your books, all these people that you meet. Potentially they could be people that are going to want to read your book. So where's the harm? So when I say be enterprising, I suppose that's about being a little bit more business-like about it and enjoying that process of getting your stuff out there and trying to earn a bit of money from it. Why not? That's the perfect thing, isn't it? Well, surely the one thing that we all aspire to do is to get paid to do something that we love, so that work doesn't even feel like work anymore. So there you go. And yeah, again, as I say, if that whole enterprising thing, if that whole business thing scares the pants off you, come and have a chat with me. I can definitely ease you through it. So I've been there. I do it for other people. So yeah, don't be scared to ask. And I suppose that leads me on to that final point, which is get help. Don't try and do it all yourself. Don't do your own book cover unless that's a particular skill you've got. Outsource it to somebody who can do that. I'm fortunate in that my husband, even though he would never admit it, he's actually quite creative. He wouldn't call himself that at all. And he actually designs my book covers for me. So that's fantastic to have that resource under my own roof. But, ask around, offer the work to a potential student, find out about your friends' kids or whatever. If you want to try and do it on the cheap, use things like Fiverr, hire, whatever, go out there and hustle a bit and outsource stuff. Don't be afraid to do that. Don't be scared to ask for help. There are people out there who want to help, who are here to help. I'm one of them. There's plenty more of us out there, so just ask. One of the things that was a really valuable lesson for me, actually, when I first published the Bronze Box, and I did make a mistake. I did try and do it all myself. I didn't do my book cover, but I didn't really get any professional help in terms of editing and proofreading and that kind of thing. And that was a costly mistake, I suppose, if you like, in terms of my own pride, I guess. I got some really bad reviews, and I take it on the chin. I deserved it because it had loads of mistakes in it. Because when you're trying to edit your own stuff, you don't notice mistakes that you don't realise you've made. And your brain reads what it thinks it's written. So now I would never publish a book without at least getting 4 or 5 beta readers to read it. And with Solomon's Secrets, I actually conducted a crowdfund so that I could get some money together so that I could pay for some professional help. So I paid for some professional editorial help. I paid for some proofreading, all that kind of stuff. And that was really helpful. So essentially the crowdfund I was essentially just selling pre-orders of the book, and people were paying, and then I used that money to pay for the help that I needed to make it a better book, and it made such a difference. And actually in my own business life, the thing that makes the biggest difference to me was really that moment that I started to trust other people to help me with my business and actually ask for help and offer help, because that's what it's about at the end of the day in life, in business. Help other people, they'll help you. So ask for help, people are willing to give it. Give help, people are willing to accept it. So it's all part of that virtuous circle, I suppose, if you like. So those are my my top tips, I suppose, for other budding writers. Okay. So I think that pretty much brings me to the end of that. Thank you to everybody who answered the questionnaire and contributed questions throughout the webinar. That's fantastic. I really, really appreciate you joining me today. So stay in touch with me. Talk to me about blogging, talk to me about writing, talk to me about an editorial review. I've done that with a few non-fiction books where people have written business books. They've come and spoken to me, and I've helped them edit their books for them. So talk to me about that. Talk to me about self-publishing, or just come and say hello. You know, sharing is caring after all. So connect with me on social media. There I am. I'm Amy_writer on Twitter. I'm Amy C Fitzjohn on Instagram, and then I've got an author page, Amy C Fitzjohn. Okay. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining me this afternoon. And yeah, as I say, stay in touch. So if you're a budding writer, good luck. Go get them. You'll be fantastic. It will be good. Let me know how it goes. If you're a reader, then yeah, go ahead, enjoy it. Enjoy the adventure. I hope this has been an interesting insight into the people that create the stuff that you love reading. So thank you very much for joining me today. Bye.